Joy. Welcome back to my channel. Today I've got a quick card to share using some of my favorite products from Maker Forte. Today I'm using the straight and narrow background stamp, the Grateful to You stamp set featuring a beautiful floral, and Color Hive inks in the color of Pop Art and Tartan Teal. So I started out by placing my straight and narrow background stamp into my MISTI and inked it up using the Pop Art and Tartan Teal. I chose these colors because they are from the same color family and would blend easily. So when I placed the ink onto the stamp set, I haphazardly put down the ink because I didn't have to worry about harsh lines or it not blending because they are so close in color. Once I was happy with the amount of ink, I then used my ink smushing tool and applied the pressure to get a good impression. I then laid that to the side to dry while I brought out the Grateful to You stamp set. I inked up the floral with Memento Tuxedo Black. I will say typically I would use my Eclipse Black Color Hive ink, but I just got back from the Nashville craft retreat and my craft room is a disaster and I was not able to put my hands on the ink quickly. So when I'm done with this card, I will look for that ink. Anyhow, I decided to color the florals with Copics. As always, I start with my foliage. I know that there are two different types of foliage here, but I stuck with the same color family for all of the leaves. So I used BG 93, 96, and 99 for all of the leaves. I started out by moistening my paper with the BG 93. I put down a light coat of that, again, just to prime the paper so that it was ready to take more ink and more texture, if that makes sense. I love this color combination. I typically do not use it because I am married to the YG family, but the BGs have been calling me lately. In fact, I went on to Pinterest to find out what colors I wanted to use today as my inspiration. So if you ever are stuck with what colors to use, I highly recommend looking for color palettes, either Googling it or going to Pinterest. So next I came in with my BG 99. And what I did there was anywhere a flower or another leaf would overlap another, I put in the shadow. Using the darker color. I also followed the veins of the leaf. Now the artist drawn lines here only are straight lines. They don't have all the other little veins, but I went ahead and took care of that with my coloring. And that's what's nice with these markers. They layer nicely. You can build up the color, you can add texture. So that's what I do. So I start by, like I said, adding in the one vein, and then I start flicking in some of the darker color. And I still was not done with that. I still needed to bring in my mid-tone, which is the color that you see the most. So with that one, I brought in the BG 96, and I continued to flick or feather in what would be the veins of the leaves. And again, I still wasn't done. So I came back in with my BG 93 and I went to the edges of the leaves and I flicked towards the inside of the leaf. That way I had texture both on the outside and the inside of the leaf, trying to give it some dimension. So while I finish up coloring the leaves, I want to tell you about some events that are going on with Maker Forte. On June 13th, you're going to see the Mr. Maker Monday, where new products will be released. And I am sure Greg has something clever up his sleeve, as he always does, so be on the outlook for June 13th. Then the Summer Craft Camp starts on June 14th at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and that is with Eileen Hall. I believe that that's going to be some sort of flip book that is going to be made. You can sign up for that at www.summercraftcamp.com. And then on June 17th, Unfoiling Fanatics, you will find even more new products, and that YouTube will be scheduled for 7:30. And then on July 1st, you can look forward to even more new products to be released. Now let's talk about the floral. I decided to go with a soft pink for the roses. So I started out by coloring the petals of the rose with R81. And when I did that, I did not color all the way to the top of each petal so that I could leave a white highlight. And I did that on every petal. And then I came in with my R85. And with the R85, I started where the crease would be or where the two petals would come together. So obviously the petals that are like folding down, I flipped that color going down, but where the petals would curl up, I made it so that the R85 would kind of curl up or go the opposite direction, giving the illusion of a 3D flower. I then came in with my R83, which is the mid-tone or the color that you see the most, and I blended out the R85. And you'll see that I still have a pretty good white highlight in there on each of those petals. I, however, did come back in with the R81 because I lost some of that. I needed a little bit more contrast in there. But I still left quite a bit of the flower white so that you'd have the illusion of light bouncing like in a garden. Then I came in with the berries and I put down a BG11 over the entire berry. And I did that again to moisten the paper and because it's the lightest color. Then I came in with my BG, I believe it was 75, and I went in to where the berries would overlap themselves and like right where the dimple of the berry is, and I put that darker color in there. And then from there, I used my BG72. Now you have to remember this BG72 versus this BG11. So the BG11 is a very pastel color, where the 70 family is saturated, meaning it's got more gray in it. So I use colors that don't necessarily play nice all the time, but because I came back in with the BG11 at the end, which has more alcohol in it, it was able to push those colors back and blend. From there, you can't really see it on screen because I'm using embossing ink and white embossing powder, but I stamped Happy Birthday onto my smooth cardstock, and then I heat embossed that with my heat gun. I left that in a little bit, but I did realize that you weren't going to necessarily see it. You can kind of see the shadow, but not much in there. And then I decided to do another technique. I think sometimes we forget that we can make our own papers or cardstocks. So once the embossing was melted and cooled, I brought in the Pop Art Color Hide ink again. And I took that direct paper and I swiped it across the paper. Now you're going to notice that it seems kind of uneven right now, but as it dries back smooth. And I just love the way this Happy Birthday pops from it. So I took a very, very almost dry, damp but dry baby wipe, and I lightly went over that just to buff off the ink from the Happy Birthday, and that's where you're going to see that pop. Using the exact same ink and a blending brush, I took the straight and narrow background after trimming it down to 3 3/4 by 5. I then blended the pop art along all 4 edges of the panel, just creating a vignette and more dimension without adding depth, if that makes sense, like no height to it, because I want to mail this to a friend of mine that's having a birthday in the next month. So again, I blended that with the pop art ink. And then I brought in my A2 card base, and I just glued this one down flat. I know, shocker, because typically I pop everything up. But again, I am mailing this, and my post office is starting to really crack down on postage fees. Then I took foam squares and I popped up the floral from the Grateful to You image. And using my crafter's wand, I removed the backing of that, and I adhered that to the front panel. And I kind of fidget with that placement for a second, but ultimately I go into a diagonal left to right position. And then from there I pop up the corner of the sentiment, like where the H is, and then I glue down the rest of it, so that way the sentiment banner would be the exact same height as the floral. For finishing touches, I bring in some pink crystal gems that are from my stash. I honestly couldn't tell you who they're by. They've been in my stash for, I'm betting, years. So if you have managed to stick with me this entire time, I want to say thank you. I know that you didn't have to, and I would humbly ask that you would consider liking and subscribing, maybe leaving me a comment. I do appreciate all of the encouragement, and I do read the comments and typically answer back, so I would appreciate that. And again, for more Maker Forte inspiration, you can check out their Facebook group called the Crafter Party and Instagram. So here are some final looks of my card, kind of zooming in, and do you see how nicely that ink kind of blended and dried back? I love it. I'd love to know what you think. So until next time, guys, keep crafting, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.